Atheist Alliance International podcast.
I don't make this stuff up.
You know, if you put Jesus Christ first, that he'll look after all your bills.
It's not fake, it's faith.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Atheist Alliance International podcast. I'm your host, Jason, aka Diogenes of Mayberry. Just before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone to please like and subscribe. And this week we're joined by John Lombard, who is a former missionary, is currently the director of the Vancouver chapter of Centre for Inquiry Canada, and is on the board of directors of the Clergy Project. So if you don't know what the Clergy Project is, John is here to enlighten us and tell us about an upcoming event that they're going to be hosting on January 28th. So John, thank you for joining us this morning. It's this morning for you, but thank you for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right, so yeah, quick intros because there's various organizations involved. So the Center for Inquiry, nonprofit organization, international, focuses on promoting critical thinking skills, science-based decision-making, humanist values, just things like this. Generally just, really evidence-based critical thinking, practical. And then I'm also involved in the Clergy Project, which a lot of people, when they hear the name, think it's for clergy. Actually, it's for kind of the opposite of that. It's for people who used to be in positions of religious leadership, who are now atheists. And we actually, it started out as really for ex-Christians, but it's grown much more than that since then. We have ex-Christians, ex-Muslims, ex-Jews, ex-Wiccans, ex-Hindus, ex-Buddhists, like we run ex-JWs, ex-Scientologists, you name it, we've got it there. So
it came out of
provide support for those people. Yeah.
Right. And it came out of Freedom from Religion Foundation, if I remember correctly.
That's right. Yeah, Dan Barker, who is the co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, he is also an ex-clergy. So, he got the idea, got some other people together, and they were the ones who got it all started. Yeah.
Are they still under Freedom from Religion Foundation, or it's a separate entity by itself now?
We're two separate organizations, but FRFF is still very strongly supportive of what we do.
Okay. All right. So maybe just give us a little bit of your own background. We were chatting just before we started about the missionary work you did. So just give people an intro.
Tiny village of 900 people. My dad was an Anglican minister, which small village Anglican minister would usually mean kind of like very, kind of go to church on Sundays, read your prayer book, and that's it. But my dad was an evangelical, charismatic, fundamentalist Christian. So I grew up in a very, very strong, passionate Christian household. Exorcisms, casting out demons, prayer warrior stuff, all sorts of stuff was just normal part of life for me. By 16 years old, I was preaching from my dad's pulpit. 18, I went to Bible college to study to prepare to be a missionary. And 1993, I was ready for the missionary field. And I'd been reading all these missionary biographies, and like the only people who got biographies written about them were people who died for being missionaries. So I kind of got the idea if I wanted to be a good Christian, a good missionary, I had to go somewhere where I was going to suffer. So I chose China. Yeah, and China in 1993 was still very, very closed, very, very communist, very, very authoritarian. Being a missionary there was completely illegal. You could, at best, if caught, you'd be kicked out of the country. At worst, you could be facing imprisonment in a Chinese prison. So that just seemed perfect for me. Hey, let's go suffer. Went to China, started out as a missionary, church planter, evangelist. Of course, since that's not legal, I also had an official legal job working as a teacher in university. However, my time in Bible college had kind of started me questioning. Before I went to Bible college, I had no questions. I knew what I believed, and that was it. But I didn't really know the reasons why. It was just because that's what I was told. When I went to Bible college and started learning the reasons why, I started seeing bigger and bigger holes, questions, contradictions, all sorts of problems. But I kind of just figured that it was because I didn't have enough faith. I didn't have enough knowledge. So it wasn't causing me to doubt anything at that point. It was just I need to pray harder. I need to learn more. I need to pray to the Holy Spirit for inspiration. But as time went on and I prayed and I studied, instead of the problems getting better, they kept getting worse and worse. I kept spotting more and more problems. And my deconversion as such was really a one-day affair. One day I was a Bible-believing fundamentalist Christian, and the next day, literally, I just kind of looked at it all and suddenly realized I can't believe this anymore. It simply doesn't make sense, and rejected the whole kit and caboodle. Shortly thereafter, became a secular humanist and have been a passionate secular humanist ever since. But despite giving it all up and not being a missionary anymore, I loved China. So I ended up staying in China for 25 years, starting multiple businesses there, and just came back to Canada in 2019 and started my own business here, and also recently became the director of the Vancouver chapter of Center for Inquiry Canada.
Cool. So your deconversion moment, your aha moment, was there something specific, or it was just kind of a dawning realization?
It was an accumulation of all sorts of things. I would say probably one of the biggest things for me, like there's contradictions in the Bible, theological problems. No Christians can agree on anything theologically, despite having this inerrant Bible. There were just all sorts of problems. But I think some of the biggest ones for me was after I went to China. In Canada, I was surrounded by Christians all the time. My only exposure to non-Christians was really evangelistic work, where I'm telling them why they're wrong. I didn't really learn much about them, talk to them, try to understand them. In China, being an atheist country, the vast majority of my Chinese friends were atheists. And I had Buddhist friends. The foreign community, the expat community in Qingdao, where I was, there were only about 20 of us. So we all got to know each other. So I ended up making friends with Muslims, with atheists, with Buddhists, with a Hindu. And I started realizing, like, all the arguments I made for Christianity were extremely hypocritical. Like, Christianity, we can show miracles. So this proves that Christianity is true. Hindus point out they do miracles. Muslims point out they do miracles. Oh, but that doesn't prove that you're true. Those are fake. And it was just like ongoing. Everything that Christians use as proof that we were real. Other religions use exactly the same things, exactly the same arguments, proving that they were true, but I could dismiss it all because they weren't Christians. And that was really, I think, one of the biggest factors for me, was really starting to recognize that all the arguments that I had been using simply fell apart. Every other religion used them, which meant that either it was a valid argument for every religion and they were all right, which simply didn't work, or they weren't valid arguments.
Yeah, I think a lot of former theists would agree with you on that perspective. That just from my own experience of the first convert that I know that I had told me, I ran into her about a year after we had a conversation, and she goes, "Oh, I'm an atheist now." I said, "What happened?" And she said, like, she was questioning. She had been moving around to a lot of different churches and couldn't find the right answer. And I said, "It's because you're answering, they're asking the wrong question. If you just realize that they're all wrong." And that was kind of like the dawning of comprehension for her. So,
yeah.
So, okay. So your dad was a charismatic evangelical Christian, but he was an Anglican pastor or priest or whatever they're called in the Anglican church.
Yeah.
So the Anglican hierarchy was okay with letting this
guy
go
he
wild?
was stuck in a village of 900 people. Dad was converted in the Anglican Church. He became a Christian in the Anglican Church. So he felt a lot of loyalty to it. He wanted to stay in it. So he became, went to seminary, became ordained. After being ordained is when he started moving more to the charismatic fundamentalist side. And the Anglican Church is dreadfully short of leaders. The church didn't want to kick him out as long as he wanted to be a loyal Anglican leader, but he didn't really fit with, he was never going to get a predominant leadership position, large church, because of his particular beliefs. So that's why we got stuck in the middle of butt fuck nowhere.
So they tolerated his
exactly
charismatic.
As like our church only had like 20, 30 people, something like that. So he wasn't really having much of an impact on anything.
Well, what about the people in that small community, though? I mean, were they happy with this charismatic guy that was sent to them?
I think Dad kind of kept it toned down in the church in the sermons. Okay. He tended to more like look for individuals that would be more open and receptive. So,
so he's kind of flying under the radar a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I think as far as most of the local Anglicans were concerned, it was, like I said, show up to church, read your prayer book, and go home, and I'm a good Christian.
So when you were in China, did you have any close run-ins with the law, or came
Not
close
really.
a few times?
I ended up actually being very fortunate that way. My goal of being a martyr for the Christian faith did not come to fruition, and today I'm quite happy about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Unlike that guy who went to the the island off of India and got shot full of arrows.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, are you doing, other than the event you're doing that we can talk about in a minute? Are you doing anything else with the Clergy projects? Something specific that you're working on with them? You said you're on the board of directors.
Yeah.
So what? Are you guys doing anything specific in Canada?
Not like right now. This event, although Clergy Project, I think we started in 2011 or 2013, something like that. We're over a decade old. Despite that fact, we've mostly flown under the radar. We have not been a very public organization. A lot of publicity as such about us has been more by word of mouth or just a few things. There's never been a major public event of any kind done with TCP. People have been interviewed on blogs. We've had panels at atheist conferences, but it's never been anything dedicated just to TCP. This is our first event. So I'm really trying to get the word out to raise awareness, simply because with very, very minimal publicity, we've got over 1,000 members from many, many different religious backgrounds. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's got to be tons more out there, and most of them have never heard about us. So I'm really hoping that this helps more people in those situations to hear about us. It's also primarily an American organization. Canada, we make up a small percentage of that. We have members from all over the world, but they're an even smaller percentage of the overall membership. So I'm actually in charge of international outreach. One of my major goals is to be getting out into the world, into more countries, particularly places that are more Hindu, like India with Hinduism, or Muslim countries where people who lose their faith, particularly religious leaders who lose their faith, they're literally facing death if anybody finds out. They have nobody they can talk to, no resources to draw on. Something like TCP would be something that'd be incredibly valuable for them.
All right. Okay. And do you know how many members you have currently? Or you know that number off the top of your head?
Well, actually, one of our panelists is an ex-Muslim from Ivory Coast. He's now living in the U.S., so not so much of an issue that way, but certainly in his country there was. That's the only one I know of who's in that, who's kind of from that type of background, which is part of the reason why I want to try to do more to let more people know about us.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, but not just Muslim, but like in general, like in the Clergy Project, like how many in total, how many people have you guys got now? Do you know?
Oh,
Or you-
I know we passed 1,000 last year. I would guess somewhere between 11 and 1,200 now.
right. Okay,
Yeah.
well, that's still a pretty substantial number. So
Yeah.
of people, of priests and pastors who've walked away from. And you were mentioning earlier. I can't remember if it was when we were before or during this podcast. I apologize. You mentioned it's not just for the formal clergy; it's for people like yourselves who were missionaries as well.
Yeah. This is actually a problem with the name of the organization. I'm myself and some others are pushing to rename the organization. When it was started, it was really for ex-Christian clergy. That was the focus. But they quickly realized that this was not just an issue facing Christians. It was people facing from many other religious backgrounds. And it wasn't just clergy. What about people like me, missionaries, church planters? What about nuns? What about monks in other religions? What about a Jewish rabbi? What about a Muslim imam? So the scope has broadened much, much more since it started. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, the name, the Clergy Project, still kind of gives that impression that it's only for clergy, but it's not. It
Okay.
basically anybody who's been in a position of religious leadership is kind of our standard now.
Okay. So speaking of monks and nuns, did you hear the story that came out last week about I think it was in the UK, the monk and the nun that met each other and fell in love and got married?
No,
No, oh, it was on BBC News, so it was
okay,
like and apparently like they didn't even like talk to each other. It was just like, or like they talked very briefly, like just once,
yeah.
and like that was all it took. And they'd been in cloister community for like 30 years each, something like that. It was quite interesting, like how just that one meeting just changed everything. So
No, when you're telling that, it's like monk and a nun met each other and fell in love and got married. And I was waiting for the punchline.
no, it was a news story that came out about a week
Yeah.
ago. So
Okay.
yeah, okay. So I presume then the majority of the membership are clergy, and more of a minority would be the no the monks, the nuns, the missionaries,
Oh
things like
yeah,
that.
definitely. Yeah.
Okay, okay, all right. So we've got this event, or you got this event coming up on January 28th. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that, and we can help promote that for you.
Yeah. Well, I really want to get more people knowing about and understanding the Clergy Project. Like when I talk about one of the first questions that comes up is, well, why make an organization only for ex-religious leaders? There are lots of other religious people who lost their faith. Why don't you take them as well? And there's two reasons for that. One, there's already lots of organizations for that. Freedom of Religion Foundation, American Aid. There's tons of organizations that already take care of that. The other reason is because ex-religious leaders, it can be difficult for anybody, but particularly for ex-religious leaders, they face additional hurdles. Think about a 40-year-old religious leader, male or female. Their education is all religious. Their work experience is all religious. They're 40 years old now. They've rejected their faith. They're now an atheist. If anybody finds out, if their church finds out, they lose their job immediately. There's little or no prospect of finding another job. Their education, their work experience is all in the religious field. What type of job are they going to get moving forward? They have no other experience, nothing else. Many of them, their homes are provided by the church. So when they are fired, they not only lose their job, they lose their home. They're now jobless and homeless. Their families very often are still strongly religious. They're looking at lost their family, but beyond that, their church, they've been a leader. They've been working in a place where pretty much everybody they know is not just a support circle, a community. It's people who look up to them and respect them as a leader. And when they find out that this person no longer believes, the reaction is usually anger, hatred, vitriol, rejection. Like it's not there's for all the talk about Christian love and charity, usually when a religious leader loses their faith, there's very, very little of that going on.
Yeah.
People receive threats. They're completely ostracized. The only love as such is the people contacting them to try to reconvert them. So there's like all these additional barriers. In fact, I think something like a quarter, about 25% of our members, are still in positions of religious leadership, despite the fact that they're atheists. And for most of them, it's not because they want to be there. They desperately want to get out. Many of them are fighting severe depression, alcoholism, drug abuse, all sorts of problems because of the stress. But they're in a position where they know if they leave, they're jobless, homeless, they're out on their ass with no support. So TCP is there to provide that support. First, a sense of community, other people that have gone through exactly the same thing that they're going through, that can really understand what they're going through. We provide job skills training. We help people with, train them in job skills or find them programs to train them in job skills, help them with resume preparation, help them with job search. We've hooked in with a network of secular psychologists and therapists that can provide free therapy for them to help them out. Like there's a whole bundle of services and everything that we provide. And one of the great ironies to me is in Christian circles in particular, when they talk about TCP, they often depict us as this organization that's trying to get religious people in positions or atheists in position of religious leadership in order to undermine the church and everything. And no, it's actually the dead opposite. We are trying desperately to get them out. We don't want them there, and if their churches knew that they were atheists, they wouldn't want them there either. They should be supporting us to help them get the secret atheists out of their churches. But anyway, that's essentially TCP and what we do. I joined. I remember back when I first rejected Christianity, when I became a secular humanist. I thought I was like pretty much the only one. I had never heard of a missionary in the field becoming an atheist. Religious leaders in general becoming atheists. You heard about atheists who became Christians, but I'd never heard about the other way, particularly leaders. And when I discovered TCP, it would have been, I think, around 2014. It was a mind-blowing revelation to me to discover how many other people were out there just like me. And again, at over 1,000 members, we're still just the tip of the iceberg. So it's just nowadays, I was pretty much over the transition. I wasn't facing the trauma, the difficulty. My role now is much more helping those that are going through that right now, providing that support, encouragement, everything like that.
And you say you're not well known, but I would assume that any member of the clergy who's having these doubts, we're in the information age. With a quick Google search, like, hey, is there support for atheist clergy? They would find you guys, with a couple of clicks.
Yeah, and that's pretty much how most of our members find us. Yeah, but pretty much in most cases, it's always I found it through a Google search or whatever. As far as general awareness of the organization, not really there. So I think for someone who is, I think most of the people who come to us are people who are coming to us who are current religious leaders, who are in that situation, are coming to us in more a situation of crisis. I'd like the organization to be better known so that they're hearing about us and knowing about us before that they reach that point of crisis, of desperation.
Yeah, you should go to some of the religious conventions and set up
we
a
do.
booth.
Yeah.
Seriously? Really?
Sorry, atheists, not religious ones. No, I don't think we would be welcomed there. Yeah.
We'll set up a booth outside in the parking lot or something.
The Clergy Project, but
yeah. No, just have a booth in the parking lot and hand out flyers.
Yeah, yeah,
Just yeah. I
yeah,
was at an atheist conference in 2015, and the they're just dumb luck. There happened to be an evangelical conference going on in the next room, and a couple of them came peeking over to see what it was all about. So it was quite ironic. So because
yeah,
doesn't the Southern Baptists or the Methodists, they have like a big conference like down in the South every year.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you guys should go down there, and you might pick up a few.
Yeah, but I think part of the thing with that, obviously, first of all, we're not an evangelist organization, but more than that, 99% of the people who are there are not the people that are for us. Again, we're just for religious leaders. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, if we were doing something like that, it'd have to be more of a religious leadership convention.
Yeah. Well, you might
Uh,
cause quite a bit of a media stir if you showed up at a religious convention, and that would help
that'd be
to
possible.
raise some
Yeah.
attention. Okay. So you got a conference on January 28th. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that? The name of the
Yeah.
conference, who's
So
coming?
it's our first event that's really focused just on TCP. So as the director of the Center for Inquiry in Vancouver, um, this is actually our first event since I took over. The Vancouver chapter's been suspended for about 3 years, so nothing's been happening. I took over, so I wanted particularly our first event to be something kind of with a big bang to draw attention, and so I with my role in CFI and in TCP, seemed like a perfect marriage. Um, and so yeah, we've got Dan Barker from Freedom of Religion Foundation. He's going to be the moderator, and then we've got a panel of 5 ex-religious leaders, including myself. 3 of them are ex-Christians from different types of Christian background, from fundamentalist to uh, more
Mainstream.
yeah, more mainstream. Then we have an ex-Muslim from Ivory Coast, and we have an ex-conservative Jewish rabbi. So we're trying to again get the message out. This is not just a Christian thing, and basically everybody will be sharing their stories like about their religious background, what religion they were in, and why, and their what what leadership role they were in, what they did. Then why did they end up rejecting it? What challenges, what problems did they face when that happened? And then kind of coming out the other side, what is their life like today? Where are they at today? So it'll be 3 hours long. First half will be just question and answer from the moderator asking questions. Then second half will be Q&A with the audience. This will be both a live in-person event in Vancouver. So everybody's in the Vancouver area, we're at UBC Robson Square. But we're also live streaming on Zoom. So people can also register to join by Zoom. Of course, that's available internationally. And with the Q&A, we will be taking questions on Zoom as well. Uh, Questions, comments, anything like that. So those who are watching remotely can still participate.
And of the audience that you're expecting, are you primarily expecting like some of these clergy who are having some doubts are going to be coming, or this is just open to
No,
everybody?
obviously, first of all, it'll be predominantly atheists. I'm actually trying to get the message out in the religious community here. Even if we just have people show up in protest, whatever, having more people hear about it. But yeah, no, I don't expect a lot of people participate. Like the majority are not going to be religious leaders, but certainly, hopefully, some percentage will be. More importantly, is just like with you, I'm trying to connect with atheist, humanist, secular organizations all around the world and letting their membership know, so that this will be the first time in many of these countries where people have ever heard about this. So this hopefully just helps build that awareness and get the word out. And it will be, I'm certain it'll be a really, really interesting event for anybody that does tune in. We've got a great group of people, all with really, really great, really interesting stories.
Okay. And is the event after it's live? Are you guys going to be putting it up on YouTube so people who are might
Yeah,
be asleep in that time zone?
we'll be recording it and making it publicly available.
Good. Yeah. Because
So yeah,
some people
with the time
there's
zone,
going to be people asleep.
some people in other
Yeah.
parts of the world may not be able to make it. So yeah, it'll be available afterwards.
Okay. And what's the name of the conference?
It's called When Religious Leaders Become Atheists.
Okay. So quite on the nose for the title. So
Yeah, no question in anybody's mind about what the topic is.
yeah. Okay. All right. So we'll have the link in the description. So anybody who's watching this in the AAI community, the link is in the description if you want to go and register either on if you're in Vancouver and you want to go, or you want to register for the Zoom. You'll be able to find that link in the description. So, okay. So John, any parting thoughts before we sign off?
Just please come and check us out, whether you catch the live one or the recording afterwards. And please, once we have the recording, please share it on your Facebook, your Twitter, whatever. Share it in social media. Let as many people know about this as possible. There are thousands of people out there that are in similar situations that feel like there's nobody else like them. They're on their own. They're lost. They're suffering depression. They're going through terrible, terrible trauma. And we're here to help them. So help us get the word out.
Great. Hopefully we can bring a few people to your door. So I'm just remembering a former podcast guest who's a professor and former Catholic priest himself. I'll make sure I mention this to him, and maybe he can share it around his network as well. So, all right. Well, I'd like to thank you for coming on today and telling us about your story, telling us about this event and the work that you're doing. And I certainly hope that we can help spread the word for you. So,
yeah, thank you very much, Jason. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate having you on. Okay, so I'd like to remind everyone to please like and subscribe, and please do check out the links in the description. We'll put in the Clergy Project, we'll put in Freedom from Religion, we'll put the link to the event, and then you guys can find all that stuff. So great. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see everybody on the next show. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks for listening, and don't forget we're on YouTube, so follow us on YouTube. Just search for Atheist Alliance International, and please subscribe and hit that notification bell. We're also on all of your favourite podcast platforms, so make sure that you follow us on there as well. See you next time.